What drives this interest? I mean, I think it's, people think of,
Right?
yes, thank your mom.
Dad, Mommy, Dad, and Dearest. Erin, another great documentary, another great true crime doc made by you. A few years ago, Erin made a documentary about the cannibal cop, which was pretty phenomenal. You had up close personal access to him like nobody else did. And now you have up close personal access to another kind of icky true crime story.
Thanks.
What drives this interest?
Okay, guys, I'm gonna try this again. Let me see. All right, let's see. I'm gonna hit play again. Let's see.
What drives this interest? I mean, I think it's, people think of sort of true crime potentially as being a little bit lowbrow, but I don't think it is. I think it's dealing with like liberty, with death, with murder, with things like that.
Okay, let's see now. That was. We'll do a take two. All right. I'll have to keep my eye on that. I can't put the chat on there. All right, cool. We'll just do this and I'll.
I mean, how could you not sort of want to think about that? So I've always been interested in it, and if I can keep making movies about it, I will.
And how did you come across this story? And we'll get into what this story is in just a minute, but I'm going to tease you guys and lead us there.
Yeah, of course. So I was working with my co-producer Allison Byrne, who I worked with on Thought Crimes for HBO, and there was this thought catalog piece, and it was this long, rambling, very just sort of very odd post about a young girl who was wheelchair bound that was involved in some way in the death of her mother.
Okay, so as I tried to do before, and I was not letting you guys hear what she had just said, so hopefully this will make more sense. Out of the 16 interviews that I've read and the four that I've watched, she only mentions the author of the actual thought catalog piece twice. And that is MJ Pack. MJ Pack actually attended all of the hearings all the way up to the plea deal. MJ Pack actually wrote, it was not a rambling nor thoughtless, weird article, as she called it. But for some reason, she does not like to credit MJ Pack with that article. She just says it was a thought catalog piece.
And so Allison started talking to me about it, and like just like we were two schoolgirls, I was like, I have to know more. And so then I began the long, slow process of reaching out to the girl in question.
What did that process entail? Why was it long? Why was it slow?
Well,
Where were they? Where were they already in their own process?
Sure. So Gypsy Blanchard was facing potentially the death penalty. She was involved in the murder of her mother, and so I reached out to her in a letter in prison, and basically she said, I can't talk right now, but I want to talk to you. And so it was this very slow, long process of trying to gain access to her. And so then when we were finally given access, then I had to go to the prison, asked to film there, and like prisons do not like you filming there.
Lie number two. She had access to Gypsy Rose all the way back to a year prior because she was visiting her in the Greene County Jail. She didn't ever visit her in actual prison. No, that's Melissa Moore who did that. She's using the word prison when she knows better because she clarifies it in one of the 16 article interviews that she gave on the tour, on the press tour that HBO sent her on to 17 different magazines and all of these different videos here. But no, she actually saw Gypsy Rose face to face with bulletproof glass in between the two of them repeatedly as she traveled from California to Louisiana, staying nearby to keep interviewing Rod and Christy Blanchard. She actually sat down without a bulletproof glass in between the two of them for the first time On the day that Gypsy Rose took her plea deal that she helped facilitate by assisting Mike Stanfield with obtaining medical records for her documentary. Everybody talks about this medical records bullshit. You're looking at the woman right there. She took incomplete medical records and created a full blown documentary assailing the character of Dee Dee Blanchard. Let's hear why.
Yeah, they hate it.
Yeah, she like came into the interview with handcuffs. I couldn't
Because she had just taken a plea deal. She was in the very same courtroom.
I couldn't really touch her. This was, like in terms of shaking her hand, like, we just like touched elbows, but
Did
like,
what we did just
yeah,
now.
like I couldn't, I couldn't even sort of make her feel safe or comfortable. She was in handcuffs, but she was there because she was involved in a murder.
You still extract a pretty incredible interview out of her. I think that one that has to do with your skills as an interviewer, but I'm also assuming it's because she wanted so badly to tell her story.
Right. So we interviewed her for 2.5, I think almost 3 hours. And before I had spoken to her, she always seemed like a little girl. She was
Right there, she even says, we interviewed her for 2.5 hours, but before, when I spoke to her, she sounded like a little girl, but not during this interview.
she wasn't always present. I asked her if she'd ever seen a documentary. She said that she hadn't. I later found evidence that she had watched the movie Blackfish, a really incredible documentary. And so it always felt like she was participating in impression management with me. So when we did the interview, I was just like, okay, like, is it going to be the infant, the baby sort of version of her, or is it going to be this adult woman who I know to be 25 years old and knows what she did was wrong? And what she did, she came to the interview in a very self-referential, articulate. She was really brutally honest about herself and about the crime.
Yeah, at the same time, you present, before I think that her interview really starts, or maybe it's halfway through the film, someone says you can't really trust much of what she's saying. So where did you fall, and how did you feel about that while you were interviewing her?
Yeah, I mean, I worked with our team a lot. So it's Andrew Rossi, producer and incredible filmmaker, Andrew Kaufman, and I mentioned Allison, and it's called being an unreliable narrator. And when you're making films about crime, you can't always trust the subject because they have a reason to lie to you. So what do? You look towards the evidence. You look at the medical records.
There you have it. Everybody worried about how all these medical records got put out. Christy Blanchard gave this woman here unfettered access to any and every medical record as her legal stepmother. She started calling her her daughter right away because HBO needed her to.
You look at the police reports, you talk to both sides of the story. What I find really impressive was that not just that the defense team spoke with us, but also the prosecution spoke with us. Typically you're going to get a one-sided story, and I think it's pretty clear that I don't think an abuse victim belongs in prison for that long. But I think that it was important.
She wanted Gypsy to only get 5 years. She was disappointed that she was given 10.
That the prosecution feel like they also had something to say.
Now let's talk about her as an abuse victim. We saw a little bit of it in the trailer, but not so much. Talk about Gypsy Blanchard's past, what led up to the murder of her mother.
And so this is where we get to the heart of the matter. This is how the entire narrative was built, that Dee Dee Blanchard's murder was justified. I'm not going to call it schmurder. I don't care if TikTok knocks this off. I'm going live right now over on my YouTube channel by the same name. So, no, this is how. Listen.
Without really giving away, it's actually hard to have this conversation because you don't want to give away the whole story for when people tune in tonight on HBO at 10 p.m.
Right. It is really difficult to explain. It basically, the movie starts with a murder. It's the crime scene. So that is not the most interesting part. It's about why did the murder take place. And without giving away too much, I can talk about basically the woman on my left, the woman in blue that's smiling, sort of grinning, really. She kept her daughter sick for years and years and years of her life to gain disability benefits from the government, to go to Disney World, to meet the cast of Harry Potter. She was living her sort of best life through having her daughter pretend to be disabled. There was just extreme amounts, like shaving Gypsy's head so that it would seem like she was getting chemotherapy, making her take epilepsy meds so her teeth would fall out.
You're saying she made her take epilepsy meds so her teeth would fall out. Thus begins the demonization of Dee Dee Blanchard.
This was the most shocking, crazy crime abuse story I'd ever witnessed. And so when we look at the end result, we look at the murder, we wonder, is it justified?
Did you hear that? We wonder, is it justified? And in all 16 interviews, you pretty much say that it is. I mean, not pretty much, you do say it is. And as you go on to include Christy in some of these interviews, you all believed that Dee Dee, or tried to make the world believe that Dee Dee would have killed her. This is how Melissa Moore comes out now and says it was a kill or be killed situation. This woman right here teaming up with Christy Blanchard on behalf of HBO to make a deal with Mike Stanfield to make this more than just two teenagers on the internet that decide to commit a murder because they want to run off together. This made it a lot more interesting.
And like, that's one of 80 things I could bring up right now in terms of what happened in this case. Like, it's just, what happens when you're held hostage, not only in your own house, but in your body.
Now, what do you think
Interesting when you're held hostage how you can show up at Dan's house with a bunch of pills that you stole. I thought you were being held hostage. How did you get out?
about Gypsy serving?
How about the time that Dee Dee made her sleep out on the front porch? According to Gypsy, most hostages aren't set outside in the wild and say, stay here. You're hostage.
Time. Obviously, you said if you commit a murder, you should, serve some time. But an abuse victim serving time is a different thing. What about the type of time that she is serving? Is she in a prison? Is she in a institution? Is she somewhere where she can be reformed and get help? Because obviously, if there's someone who could be reformed in some capacity, it's an abuse victim who lashed out.
Right. I don't want to throw shade at the Missouri State prison system, but I will.
Oh, they think it's funny?
That is not a place to get help.
Other than all of the courses that they offer and provide, including AA, NA, counseling, therapy, therapists, especially for long-term prisoners.
She has been psychologically traumatized, and now she is seeing a counselor at the prison. She's at Chillicothe Prison.
Oh, wait a minute. According to Gypsy, what she told the Kardashian woman was that she was never allowed to see a counselor. Oops, Erin Lee Carr didn't get the memo, Gyps.
In Missouri. That is not enough.
It's not necessarily that prison system's fault, right? I mean, that prison system isn't built to do this. It's the system itself that isn't sort of putting things in place to help people who need.
But that's where they put her. That's where they put her in a prison, so they are taking responsibility for her well-being. She was not placed in a mental health facility. Sometimes that happens. Like, she could have gone to a health facility. No, she's in a prison. I think that the majority of the work internally and externally will have to happen when she's outside, when she gets on the outside.
And boy, we're seeing all that work take place, aren't we? Yeah, she's doing real good, Erin.
Because you're talking about a young girl who her abuse was so much of that abuse was manipulation, and she has learned how to manipulate.
Some of that abuse was physical. Yeah. Like, it wasn't manipulation. I mean, she had surgeries done on her. I think that when I first started working on this, I was like, okay, like, so out in public, when you're at the movies, you're forced to be in a wheelchair. That is not the case. She had her salivary glands removed because she was drooling in doctor's visits.
And that was the doctor that made that decision. Now, of course, Gypsy has lied repeatedly about how any of those surgeries took place, but when the actual medical records came out, I want to say every single one of them were necessary for someone with the microdeletion. You never hear in her documentary or in any of these 16 interviews that she did while she did her press tour for HBO, any of them do they mention microdeletion, even though she was diagnosed with it in 2011.
She was drooling because her mother kept giving her medication. I mean, these were invasive sort of things. She had a feeding tube. I part of me always wondered, like, why didn't she run away? What and she tried once to run away, but what I always come back to, and what a lot of loud people have emailed me very clearly, saying, you do not know what it feels like to be psychologically and physically abused in this way. You say, oh, she could run away, she couldn't.
She did repeatedly, not just the one time either. She ran away a lot. And where's the chains thing? Isn't aren't you up on the story running away? Why aren't you saying she was chained to a bed? I mean, because that was the story we were told by Hulu and Michelle Dean, who had also, by the way, in one of these interviews, this woman here laments the fact that Michelle Dean beat her to writing a BuzzFeed article about it.
She couldn't.
Right. Why don't they run away is the same sort of victim blaming that women who or people in domestic violent relationships
Right.
get all the time.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's a hostage movie.
This is a hostage movie. When did you come to terms with that?
Right there, you see it? She winks at this guy 3 times in this interview. I'd back it up, but I'm not sure the damn sound might stop again if I did that. She winks at this dude over the concept that this is a hostage movie. And remember, they start this entire thing out with a whole huge laugh about the fact that this is debuting and premiering on HBO on Mother's Day. They think that's funny.
Did you figure that out at some point, or did you just say that right now?
For a long time as a woman have been very scared of the thought that you could be walking down the street as a young girl and you could just get snatched. And like as young people, we're talked about as stranger danger and things like that. And so when this happens, in your own home, with your parent, I mean, that's when it sort of occurred to me that it was a hostage. Like she could not get up and walk away. She could not do anything. And I watched Heavenly Creatures and the film Room, which is spectacular movies. And it just sort of like during the edit, this is what it sort of came to us.
She is once again.
That was all very seriously inarticulate. I don't know if you noticed all that, but I think it has something to do with the fact that she realized she just winked at the guy and it got caught on camera, and then he acted all woo-ish, when she did. Yeah, pretty funny. Uh, as woman, yeah, yeah. Stop flirting with your interviewer.
In a situation though where she cannot get up and walk away. She's behind bars. And in no way is that going to help her or reform her. Or do you have hope for her future?
I ask her in the film, is 10 years in prison better than 10 years living the way that you had to live? And she said, in prison. That is a remarkable.
I think the answer you were looking for was yes or no. Remember, this is the woman who poured through all of the quote unquote medical records and listened to Christy Blanchard for a year and a half.
Statement. And so like when I talk to her on the phone and she has this very sing-songy voice, she says, I'm doing fine, da da da. And so I don't think she's going to be that honest with me. The prison calls are recorded. I think that there's a reason to lie about your treatment in prison. I'm not saying that she's being mistreated in prison, but like I don't have clarity on that. But yeah, I think she is better off and has more access to freedom, even walking in the prison, than she did in her own house.
What were you most struck by when it came to interviewing the prosecutors or interviewing officers who had arrested her and investigated this?
Now, this was the part that I was interested in finding out because she only gained access to Gypsy thanks to Mike Stanfield. She wrote Gypsy a letter. Gypsy writes her back a letter and says, I'd love to talk to you, but I can't because of my lawyer, and gives this woman Mike Stanfield's name. Then Erin Lee Carr reaches out to Mike Stanfield. Mike Stanfield meets with her and gives her, Erin Lee Carr, access visitation rights for Gypsy by way of Rod and Christy. So, meanwhile, over on Christy's Facebook, she's gone from rest in peace, Dee Dee, you were a wonderful person, blah, 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 blah. Suddenly, she flips out of nowhere and starts posting pictures of Gypsy, my sweet, dear, loving daughter, You're my daughter. Well, that's because they needed parental consent for this woman here to be put on the visitation list to go see well, maybe they didn't. I'm taking. Oh, no, 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 no. I may be getting ahead of myself here because she was 24. They somehow needed her to get them. I want to say medical records that they couldn't obtain themselves, but in some shape or form, it all of a sudden needed to be that Christy was the one that was going her conduit to Gypsy as she flew back to California. So when she wasn't able to see her face to face in the Greene County Jail, she would have Christy ask her all the questions and get them back. It was somewhere. So the truth is somewhere in that, and it's in these articles. I've got so many. I'm starting to go cross-eyed.
You know, I really was looking forward to the sheriff interview. In press conferences, he seemed to have this sort of this flair for the dramatic. He was able to know like things are not always as they appear. And I was like, you just made a soundbite for this documentary. Like it's almost as if he knew. But when we sat down with him, he would not answer 80% of our questions. So that felt pretty
Why?
sort of. I think the trial was gonna happen soon, and he just was like he just wanted to be really careful about what he said. I think the prosecutor Dan Patterson comes across really well.
Yeah, Peachy, she doesn't even believe what she's saying. And that's why I think there's such a lighthearted, flirtatious little thing going on with her. The other interviews that she does on camera, she's a little bit more serious, but they still have these like moments of them laughing about it being put out on Mother's Day. And I mean, like inappropriate dark humor laughter is in every single one of these interviews. But this one right here, she is literally like wanting this guy to take her out to eat later.
He ultimately gave Gypsy a like a decent deal. But yeah, I mean, I was always sort of more interested in Gypsy.
And when you got in touch with Gypsy, you said it took a really long time to get her to agree to do the interview. What sort of things did you do to try to get her to agree?
I mean, there's no trying to get anyone to do anything. I think it's just speaking with the family members, and I filmed with her dad and her stepmom, and so like they were comfortable with me. And then I filmed with Mike Stanfield, and he was comfortable with me, and I was not sort of
Wait a minute. You filmed with Mike Stanfield prior to filming with Gypsy. You guys are hearing this, right? That means you were filming Mike Stanfield while he was still her attorney and they had not made the plea deal yet. The plea deal, the day she pled and the plea deal was finalized, is the day that this woman in turn, 2 hours later or so, hour later, I don't know when, was the only press allowed in the courtroom to interview her. So you're saying you had already filmed Christy Rod and Mike Stanfield prior to the plea deal being made. There you go.
confrontational when it came to our interviews. And what I tried to communicate is like, this is a human story. I'm not coming at this from like, look at this shocking murder. I'm looking at like, what happened to these people?
You couldn't because it wasn't a shocking murder. It was two young adults that met online that decided to kill somebody so that they could run off together. It was a run of the mill crime story. Your producer told you to find the story in this, and you therefore produced this BS narrative of Munchausen by proxy.
And I hope that every film that I sort of work on, it shows the human side. Like with Gil Valley and the Cannibal Cop documentary, Thought Crimes, people were so scared of him. He basically went to prison because people were scared of him, and we wanted to show that he had a human side. So I think anytime I'm interested in making something, I want to show the human element.
And I think the human element really comes across with how much time you spend with Gypsy's father in the film. What was it like getting him to participate in the film? And what were your thoughts on his? I mean, I guess you don't want to cast judgment of any kind, whether it be positive or negative, but sort of on his role in Gypsy's life, he seemed to me personally to sort of wipe his hands clean of it at a certain point.
Right, that's a great question. I spent a lot of time with Rod. Rod, works on an oil rig. He has his kids. He loves his wife. He's a very sort of put together, button down sort of guy. He does not like cameras. He does not like, lights up in his house. He does not like talking about sort of his ex-wife. But slowly but surely, I think the turning point for us was when we got on we got on a boat on the bayou and started filming him, and he just kind of was able to have sort of fun with us, and the cameras sort of went away for him.
Well, I'm glad creating a documentary about a person's untimely murder is a lot of fun for you.
But he does take ownership that he could have investigated what was going on with his kid. From what he knew, she was really well cared for, and he had a job. He had kids. They were in a different state. I think he carries guilt with him, but Gypsy, and for her part, says she does not blame him. Dee Dee, her mother, was a master manipulator, and there's really nothing that he could have done because they were so far away.
And wasn't Dee Dee's mother also a manipulator? Isn't that you explore that? There's like a family history of manipulation.
You're hearing these questions, right? And you want to sit here and tell me that Mommy Dead and Dearest was not a straight up hit piece on the Petrie family? Even this guy who is staring at her chest right there because he's asking her out for dinner later on. They've already got one wink. There's going to be another wink coming up. There's actually two more as they flirt with one another. Even he's able to see that you basically have a Munchausen by proxy, runs in families kind of thing going with this, huh?
Right. There are some allegations in the film surrounding the death of her mother, but I won't say more than that.
Keep it mysterious.
Little winky.
Yes, very mysterious.
Let's get some questions from the audience right here.
Hey, this movie actually seems pretty fascinating. I never even heard of a case like this. I was just wondering, like, were there like similar cases that you found, related to this, or like, was there anything specific that drew you into it?
Yeah, of course.
Of course, at the same time, and we all may have forgotten, but at the same time, Lacey Spears was going on. And it was easy to say, we've got another Lacey Spears situation over here. If we find our facts right, we can actually make it look like she wasn't pretending that she couldn't walk, but that she was being Munchausen by proxied into a wheelchair over there. And all we have to do is find enough evidence that we can make a case, and the preponderance of evidence will all of a sudden become the global narrative on this poor woman who was butchered while she slept in her bed.
There was a case involving a woman named Lacey Spears who
Oh, the first name that pops up, huh?
was charged in the death of poisoning her son through salt. And I was pretty obsessed with that case.
You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. She was obsessed with Lacey Spears when her producer handed her MJ Pack's article, blog, thought catalog about this situation, and she was able to Lacey Spears Dee Dee Blanchard. I can make Dee Dee Blanchard into Lacey Spears. Just give me some access to the family.
So basically, a large part of the film is about Munchausen by proxy, which is a psychological disorder where a mother or caretaker feigns illness in their child, and so like that as a psychological principle seemed fascinating to me.
You're hearing it. Seemed fascinating to you. How can we make everyone believe that Dee Dee Blanchard had Munchausen by proxy? That's all you had to do, and you had a compelling documentary.
This for this story, it just had so much. It had so many more turns, and in the other case, the child died. I mean, it's really, really difficult for people to watch films about where a child has passed away because of an action. But we are lucky, and I sit here today and I can have sort of like goofs with Ricky about it, like because she's alive. It's gonna be okay.
Did we have goofs? I didn't
Sort
think
of. Some laughs, like 2 laughs.
With the case that you're
That's them flirting. You see, I mean, this is fucking crazy. So you're sitting there laughing while you're discussing this woman who is on the screen right beside the two of them, who lay butchered to death. Okay, over after 2 years of premeditation, and you two are sitting there ready to go get a chili dog at the fair later, and laughing about how all you really have to do is declare that the person who died has Munchausen by proxy, and suddenly the murder is now justified.
Talking about where the mother was poisoning her son. What is her name again?
Lacey Spears.
That is the case where she was slowly poisoning him over the course of a number of years, right? It was a pretty big case, like a year or two ago, or was it more recent than that?
Right, and she, I think that, while she had brought him to the hospital, she actually went into the bathroom and was seen, a camera is not in the bathroom, and that's where the prosecutor said there was this fatal dose of salt in his feeding tube. It's despicable, it's evil. It's mindless. Like, you can't really understand it.
Is it just
So that is an actual case of Munchausen by proxy. And there are no documented points whatsoever in the history between Dee Dee Blanchard and Gypsy Rose Blanchard where she was doing anything like that. We've all seen The Sixth Sense. Remember that movie? Remember the one daughter tells Bruce Willis's character, watch this VHS tape. He puts it in and he sees that every day the mother was putting Drano in the girl's soup and then stirring it and then gives it to her and then says, oh, honey, you know how you get sick after lunch all the time? That is Munchausen by proxy. Dee Dee Blanchard did nothing of the sort.
despicable and evil, or have they found sort of like where that comes from psychologically in a parent? Is it just evil manipulation, or is there some sort of attachment disorder?
Well, I think with Lacey Spears, and of course, I'm not a doctor in any way. I'm not an expert, but
We're just speculating.
just have.
Just a little irresponsible speculation on.
Yeah, laugh it up, but that's what it is. It's an irresponsible speculation that you guys set up and went ahead and made as much bias as you possibly could so that everything that came out after this documentary, every single thing automatically assumed, oh, you're talking about the woman that had Munchausen by proxy. She was never diagnosed with it, and she actually does not fit the diagnosis.
Oh, geez.
Funny stuff.
I think that it basically, mothers get into this mindset of, my child is sick, and then when a doctor can't find it, the mother will make the child sick to be proven right. Thank goodness.
How did Dee Dee give her a microdeletion? That should be what the guy's asking. Wasn't she diagnosed with a microdeletion in 2011? And if all she was doing was Munchausen by proxy, how did she manage to go in and delete one of her chromosomes? Do you have an answer to that, Erin Carr? We're waiting.
It's completely rare that for this to happen, but it still exists. And in the age of social media, where you can get attention for having a sick child, there is this crazy new wave of Munchausen, basically posting about your sick child and potentially making them sick to make the post true.
That's called malingering. Malingering is when you make a child sick for attention. Munchausen by proxy is when you're doing shit like the woman in The Sixth Sense, when you're intentionally poisoning and doing things to your child so that they cling to you and you only, because that you are the only one that knows how sick they are. They're staying sick and have to depend on you. That's Munchausen by proxy.
Next question.
Hi.
People posting about how sick their fucking kids are, that's malingering at worst. And then at probably at best, it's what everybody fucking does to get sympathy clicks.
So I'm curious, I think we're living in a time where true crime documentaries are becoming really, really popular, and like everyone's talking about them, like Making a Murder and the Amanda Knox story. So why do you think, these kind of things become such a phenomenon?
I love the Amanda Knox film. Shout out to Brian McGinn. He is an incredible director. And then his co-director, Rod. That movie was just like, I remember I was so excited for that. And like, I love documentaries, but for me to be really excited about something, there has just to be this like fascination.
They did a great job with that doc too. They did a great job exploring the element of the media and social media at that time.
Totally. So I think that true crime has always been around. And, like you look at HBO's Paradise Lost trilogy by Bruce Fenosky and Joe Berlinger, that was giant. But I think that we're
Yeah, and guess where that was produced? HBO. You wanted to compete with them and get in on the same viral nature that Paradise Lost had.
living in this age where basically there is an HBO, there's a Netflix, there is just access to millions of people in a way that can basically vocalize how interested in the subject matter they are. I think that it's just by virtue of interest, like your interest and my interest, and hopefully your interest, and
See the flirting? She's constantly flirting with this guy. It's very annoying.
some other people potentially who have an interest tonight.
Well, there's also the idea
Oop, you saw it. She said, hopefully has an interest tonight, and winks at him.
that you said at the beginning of this interview, you said it's not just lurid, that true crime also involves murder, it involves honor, it involves family. There's all of these sort of classic themes that are in it. And true crime has always been very popular. It's never not been popular. What we're seeing is people who are taking the sort of form of true crime and adding
Never not been popular. Sorry, double negative.
an element of sophistication to the storytelling, I would say.
I mean, I think that when we look at a trial, when we look at what is happening during a trial, there is nothing more at stake than a person's liberty.
So if you're noticing, they have to spend more time talking about like Munchausen by proxy in general, things of other cases, Lacey Spears, the Gill whatever guy in her other documentary, other people's documentaries, because everything that is in this little movie of hers are fabrications and speculations based on opinions and based on what was told to them by Christy fucking Blanchard.
So, like, I completely agree with that. Like, when you're waiting to hear if a guilty or in it not guilty verdict is read, I mean, it's almost like you're waiting with bated breath. I think that there's a way to do true crime incorrectly. I think it's a blame the victim, super flashy, really, really quickly put together. And
Yeah, and I think you just described Mommy Dead and Dearest. The irony in this one is why I started with this interview. There are three more that I'll be doing, but this one right here takes the cake.
I think there's a way to do it correctly. And I hope that this is that.
This is that. I think I have time for one more question. Right here.
Giggle,
For
giggle.
being here. So I'm really excited to see the doc. I'm wondering, since you're so into true crime docs and stuff like that, are there any other stories or subject matters that you'd like to explore in the future?
That is a great question. Everyone here should watch The Staircase. Have any of you watched The
Blah,
Staircase?
blah, blah.
What is the staircase?
Oh my gosh. It is the most amazing series.
She wants to binge watch it later with him in some hotel room.
I think it's on Sundance Doc Club. It is about it's about a writer who may or may not have killed his wife. And it's a little bit on the older side, but I've watched it 2 or 3 times, the entire series. It's from the defense perspective, then it's from the prosecution perspective. It is one of the most mind-blowing television experiences I've ever had. Yeah.
So are you working on other projects, other true crime projects?
What is up with this girlish, flirtatious facial expressions? Oh my God, you guys are seeing this, right? I'm not making this up.
I am.
You can't talk about them, though.
I'm covering a murder trial upcoming for a film for HBO, and working on a book and working on a couple other TV things, and just trying to keep hustling because it's the New York way.
Erin, congratulations on the film. You did an incredible job. It is thrilling, scary, and disturbing. As disturbing as it should be. Erin Lee Carr, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, what a piece of crap. Now there's 2 more or 3 more that I have queued up, and I just want you guys to see real quick. I'm gonna drop that down. I'm gonna 13 tabs, right? I don't know if it's gonna show. You see that in the video that I just put up, though. You see these. I can probably switch to this view. It's not really going to be that legible on the screen, but let's just look again here. So these are all the articles, The one that I showed clips of already, I just posted, is out of this bottom one. For some reason, they deleted that one, and I think it's because they interviewed Christy and her and Erin Carr at the same time, and Christy's saying shit like, "When we went into the house and we like searched it and stuff, we found Gypsy's DNA in the freezer." I'm sorry. Wait a minute. You found DNA in the freezer. That bring that brings about two questions that I have. One, was it in a Ziploc bag or was it in like a cup, or like a container? And two, since when can you see with your bare eyes DNA, Christy? Oh my God! They ever hey Rod and everyone come here? Look what I just saw in the freezer. It's DNA. You look at these, though, this one here, I'm going to click on it just for a second. We'll pop it into here. I'm going to go down to where she says the opposite of what you just heard, and I'm going to try to hopefully get that to be legible on the screen. If not, I will just read it off. Excuse the wind in the back. That's a fan to hide my sadness and tears. So he asked her, "How did you get access to her?" And she says it took a year and a half before I could meet her. But and then she slips up and lets it known that she talked to her on the phone, but she's okay with him assuming that means afterwards, right? But here she says it was a long, slow, painful process. Gypsy was in Greene County Jail, and I would go and visit her and meet through bulletproof glass, right? And the sheriff did not care for me. And then, so the lawyer had approved me to speak with her, and so she has to go in and say, through some very hard work from her, amazing work from her lawyer, Mike Stanfield, we arranged to interview her in a courtroom the same day as her plea hearing. So I just want you guys to know that, based on those, I mean, we're looking at quite a few articles here. She's told the story. When you're doing this many interviews over a documentary, okay, Mommy Dead and Dearest interviews 2017, Erin Lee Carr, many of which have Christy Blanchard by her side. Not many, but a few. Not many. Most of these are just her. Okay. That's called a press tour. How many articles came out about this dumbass series that's going on right now by Melissa Moore? They're all in TMZ, People, and In Touch, I think. I don't know of anywhere else, but I don't know if this hovering gives me the name of the thing. It doesn't right now, but this was the S's Salon magazine. She was in Variety. She was in the New York Times, did a review of it, but she didn't do an interview with them. This one here is really curious. This thing called Nightmarish Conjurings. So this one has some interesting quotes that I'd like to pull out eventually. Like here, okay, we just read that she was visiting her in jail, but she tells this person here it took a year and a half and it was a full year before I had spoken with Gypsy Rose. So she's back to, yeah, you're telling them the wrong thing. All right. And then, and this one, old Rod Blanchard was in on this interview. Old scared Rod, who is scared of cameras and doesn't like to do any of that. He's in on this interview. So, yeah, I will be continuing to pull these interviews apart. And the next one, I think I may have the ability to play it.
Dan Ehrlich here for Jezebel on the South by Southwest convention floor. It's a privilege to be joined by Erin Lee Carr, the director of Mummy, Dead and Dearest. This is your second feature, and also along a similar line, your last feature as well was a true crime crazy caper.
Now, what's interesting about this one is she doesn't make those girlish facial expressions, and she never winks at this guy. She also um, insists on wearing glasses. Yeah, she's not as into this dude. But we'll go through this one during the next live. I at least want to have this one up, and I was happy to be able to pull up the articles that refute everything that she said in that interview. And this was just a test run to see if I could actually get the audio to do right, and I think I did, other than the obvious white noise in the background of this fan that I've got going. So the replay is automatically replayable on at Crafton by Proxy over on YouTube. The name of the channel is Gypsy by Proxy, um, but you may have to just click on my YouTube link on the profile page here on TikTok. But once this finishes processing on TikTok, I'm just going to have this and just put the whole thing up then to here on TikTok. But never will I be going live only on TikTok. It will always be simulcast over on the YouTube channel, and everything is going to be backed up over there. So if we lose TikTok, yeah, so what?